Hi everyone, I'm Nicky Christmas. I'm the founder and editor of Practically Perfect PA. Welcome to today's session on reward and recognition for assistants. So we conducted a survey late last year and we asked one question: what is your biggest challenge? We had a lot of responses around the area of recognition for the work that assistants do and the lack of reward. And to be honest, it was pretty depressing. We conduct these surveys on a regular basis, and this issue constantly and continuously comes up. So out of that survey, this session was born. I want to look at the assistant industry as a whole and talk about the various reasons why we are not recognised or rewarded. And then I want to finish on a more positive note and look at what we can do to change this perspective. So let's get started. I want to start by saying that the return on investment for assistants is substantial. Melba Duncan, in her now widely referenced and widely accepted article, The Case for Executive Assistants, published in the Harvard Business Review, said this: consider a senior executive whose total compensation package is $1 million annually, who works with an assistant who earns $80,000. For the organisation to break even, the assistant must make the executive 8% more productive than he or she would be working solo. For instance, the assistant needs to save the executive roughly 5 hours in a 60-hour work week. In reality, good assistants save their bosses much more than that. This is an incredibly powerful statement. The fact is that time certainly equals money when it comes to our return on investment, but it doesn't just end there. We give our companies and our executives, who are often unapproachable and disconnected with the rest of the staff, a human face. We know what is happening before it happens. We're able to solve problems and create a calm environment. We manage our executives. We understand the needs of the company and we manage complicated tasks. We don't carry much cost, particularly when it comes to training us up. The very best assistants have learned on the job and have learned by their mistakes. So for me, it goes without saying that our role is indispensable and it is investable. We save our bosses time, which enables them to be more productive, which in turn makes the organisation more money. All of this translates into a monetary value and should therefore appear somewhere in our remuneration packages. It's not just me saying that either. In a survey conducted by Robert Half back in 2018, 100% of executives said their assistants are important to their success. 100%. Administrative professionals free up on average 101 minutes a day for their executives, and 3 in 4 managers felt that administrative professionals' responsibilities had increased in the past 5 years. So we know how hard we work. We know that our contributions have a monetary value. Our senior executives know that we help them achieve success. So what's the problem here? Why do we even have a session on reward and recognition in this course? Because we don't feel it, and we're not treated in the same way as other professionals with those credentials. So these are just a few more comments from the survey that we conducted at the end of last year, and I'll give you a minute to read the comments through. These aren't great comments, are they? We did have other challenges around workload and being respected by colleagues, but as I said, these comments come up time and time again. And I doubt that many of you are surprised by that. As I said, we've been grappling with this problem since office work began and the typing pool was invented. So what are the reasons we feel so undervalued? Let's have a look at some of the reasons, and I'll go about explaining why these problems come up. Now, the first one is pretty obvious, and I think most of you will know this. It's the old-fashioned view of the secretary, or the madmen stereotype. Yep, it's really common. And despite dropping the title of secretary or working in the typing pool, it's still something that we have to deal with on a regular basis, in that people don't understand what our job involves these days. The second one is that billable staff receive reward and recognition, but support staff do not. By billable staff, I mean, for example, if you work in a law firm, it's the lawyers. If you work in an insurance company, it's the brokers. I used to work in insurance and also for an accountancy firm. So I've heard this one a lot over the years. And I must say it's incredibly annoying because it assumes that support staff don't create the wealth of the business, which just isn't the case. The third one is this: your executive likes the way things are working. They don't want to see you move on or move up in the role. Some people, obviously, as we know, enjoy the status quo, and executives are no different. Why promote an assistant who's making their life a whole lot easier? And what's the point of rocking the boat when there are other executive assistants that aren't getting pay rises or promotions either? The next one is this: there's no career development structure in place for assistants. And again, this is really common. This made me want to put the need for assistants to put their career development at the centre of everything they do. And that's what we're going to be discussing across the whole of this course. Assistants are not mentioned in succession plans. They work in organisations that have development in place for the majority of staff, but not for executive assistants, personal assistants or admin staff. And they often don't have appraisals or job descriptions for their executive assistants. Or it's the alternative, and there's too much structure in place with competency models that don't reflect what we do. For most professionals, having a lot of structure and support from their organisation is a good thing. They know what to expect if they work hard. Eventually they'll move through the grades, and with that will come reward, recognition, promotions. But this isn't the case for assistants. These structures don't reflect our traditional career path, and it actually stops us moving beyond our grade without a substantial job change. And last but not least, good old-fashioned gender politics. I've heard this time and time again from so many trainers and thought leaders in our industry, and it's that one challenge that we face as assistants, because it's predominantly women who work in the assistant role, although this is changing, which is for the better, but it's still the case that so many women work as executive assistants and within admin roles that we are seen as a whole as the kind of caregiving type of gender. So, for example, women will often be associated with nursing or teaching or other caregiving roles. And this image as women as caregivers can stop us being seen as professionals. Now, if you think about it, over the years, how many times have you been referred to as the office wife or the office mum? I know I certainly have. And think about how that turns you from a professional working in the office into something completely different. Now, as much as I would love to put the world to rights on some of these issues, I only have 25 minutes to talk to you today. And I think that we will flesh out some of these other issues across the course. But I think we are all in agreement that something has to change. The industry has to change and it has to move forward, because 78% of assistants feel that they are undervalued, not personally, but as a profession, and that's way too high. So I'm going to focus on one area that we can all improve, and that's ourselves as individuals. What can we change in our day-to-day role that will help us feel more recognised and then hopefully rewarded? Now, I will say that these tips will also make you better at your job and better in your role. And I'm not telling you these things because I want you to support your executive better or think about the needs of your organisation. That's a byproduct of this session. I'm giving you this advice because it's going to help you. It's going to help you personally and individually. I make no apologies for that. You've got to put your career at the centre of everything that you do. So let's get started. So I've got a quick quote to get us started. I'm going to give you some examples of how you can change your own behaviour to enable you to gain more reward and recognition. But I want you just to read this quote through with me. So I'll give you a minute to read it. It says, take a minute, look at your goals, look at your performance, see if your behaviour matches your goals. So as I said, I'm going to give you some examples of how you can change your own behaviour to enable you to gain more reward and recognition and work towards your goals. So my first tip is this: if you don't ask, you don't get. Now, for me personally, I find this really hard. I was very much brought up by parents who thought children should wait until they are asked. This mantra was so heavily instilled in me that I never really asked for anything really until probably my mid-20s, when I realised that I wasn't getting the things that I wanted and actually I had to ask. It wasn't doing me any favours. It certainly wasn't doing my career any favours. I would wait to be asked to work on projects or take on extra work, assuming if I worked hard in the background that eventually my dedication would be noticed and rewarded. It very rarely was. So my first point, as I've said, is this: you have to look at your own behaviour. What do you want to achieve in this role and in the organisation that you work in? Could you be a little more vocal about your development and your skill set? How often do you put your hand up for work? And how often do you talk about your career goals? Also, don't make any assumptions that you know what your boss is expecting from you or your career development. You need to find out what their expectations for your future actually are. And this is so fundamental, because if your expectations don't align with their expectations, both of you will have to change your relationship for it to work. So if you don't ask, you do not get. The next idea is around proactivity. And we often talk about proactivity and how assistants should be proactive. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Assistants, as I said, have to be vocal. They have to be go-getters to receive the reward and recognition in the role. But what does that mean? And how do we act proactively in our day-to-day? So I'm going to break this down for you. Let's have a look at how you can be more proactive in order to gain reward and recognition. I love the show and tell element of my children's education. For a long time, they've had show and tell, where they come in to the classroom and they stand in front of their peers and they tell them something that they're proud of, something that their parents do, their pet rabbit, their last piece of finger painted artwork, whatever it is, they come in and they talk about their passions. And I really think in the assistant role, we need to adopt a show and tell attitude, because we're too busy getting on with the job and not sharing our achievements. Many of us certainly don't share our accomplishments with the one person that really needs to know what they are, and that's our executive. I used to get really frustrated with one of my executives because they didn't know what I was doing all day. She really didn't. And when it actually came to the appraisals that we had every 6 months, we'd have these really short conversations along the lines of, she would say something like, well, I think this year's gone really well. What do you think? And I would say, yeah, it's been good. You know, we've done this, we've done that. Yeah, it's been good. And then we would inevitably talk about actually what needed to be done the following day or the following week. And when I took a step back, around the same time that I realised that not asking for things wasn't working for me, I understood that my boss was incredibly busy. She had her own challenges, and she wasn't going to be able to give me a decent appraisal or recognise my achievements without me telling her. So I went away and I spoke to a fantastic woman that I worked with who went on to become my mentor. And she suggested that you need to show and you need to tell. You need to tell the executive what you are doing on a regular basis, so that she is aware of the amount of value that you actually bring to the role. So what I did, I started sending my executive weekly emails detailing what I had achieved that week. It wasn't a particularly salesy email, but I did make sure I put down everything that I knew would impress her. Initially, I don't think she quite knew how to respond to those emails because she didn't respond. It was like they weren't happening. But over time, I noticed that she had obviously been reading them, because in our daily catch-up sessions, she would know what I had been doing as much as I knew what she was doing. She also started to ask me to get more involved in projects because she didn't realise how capable I was. She started to talk to me about things that she would never normally have mentioned. And as I said, just from doing that one simple thing of sending a catch-up email on what I had been doing, she began to realise how much I did and how capable I was. And ultimately, it made a huge difference. The other good thing I found from writing those emails was when it did come to my appraisal, my performance review, I basically had a diary of everything I had done over that time period. And this really helped the conversation flow. What I learned from that whole point in my career was that the good work doesn't speak for itself. So you have to speak up for it. If you are doing good work, you need to be telling people what you're doing. So show and tell. Tell people what your passions are and what you're doing in your work. Another area that will help you gain recognition is if you can get your work in front of the right people. Now, a good thing to do is to start volunteering your services on a really visible project. Again, in my last EA role, a group of colleagues, including my executive, decided to do Movember. And if you don't know what that is, it's usually when a group of guys in the office get together in November and decide that they're going to grow their facial hair for charity. And it's a UK thing. I don't know if it's worldwide, but it's called Movember, where they all grow terrible moustaches and beards. So as I said, my boss, the CEO of the business, who was the most senior member of staff doing Movember, volunteered me to coordinate the efforts. We made a ton of money for charity, and after it finished, we held a big party to celebrate how much we'd raised and for all of the guys to shave off their facial hair. So during the party, everyone was telling me, and actually my boss, how great it was that we'd all come together over this month and we'd raised money to support the guys that were doing it. And my boss then decided, well, he had a thought, how can we build on the momentum of this charity work? Because we hadn't actually, up until that point, it was a small business, we hadn't done a huge amount of charity work. So we started up a charity committee to start moving forward on other charitable activities. And I offered to organise that committee because in the back of my mind I thought it's a really visible role. The CEO then sponsored the committee and then, as COOs do, volunteered a few more members of staff who again were all really senior. And I didn't just sit in the meeting, I didn't just sit there writing the minutes. I was chairing the meeting, I was organising the meetings, I was writing the agendas, I was putting forward ideas on different charitable activities that we could do. And we then went about over the course of the rest of the year setting up fundraising and other events, and I was right at the centre of it. So as I said, it's really important to make yourself visible within your organisation, and the best way to do that is to put yourself forward for things and volunteer for things. But it's also worth being strategic with that, because you don't want to volunteer for everything. You've got a really busy day job as it is. So volunteer for the things that will make you visible to the right people within your organisation, to the people who have influence and have other areas of their role that you might take an interest in or might want to move into further. So be visible, but be strategic with your visibility. So the underlining theme of this whole course is putting your career goals at the centre of everything that you do. One of the benefits that comes out of being properly recognised and rewarded is that organisations tend to see their staff as an investment. If you are not seen as an investment, then you have to see yourself as one. And that's why it's so important to keep your career goals at the front of your mind and constantly work on how you are going to achieve your objectives. You need to know, first off, and I say this to assistants all the time, that it's okay to develop yourself. Your peers are taking their careers seriously and they are investing in themselves, and their organisations are investing in them, and it's okay for you to have that too. You also have to put yourself forward and first when it comes to your schedule. You are busy, we get that, but you have to find the time in your busy schedule to develop your skills. Now, this is a great template from the recognition book for those who want to prepare a recognition plan. I recommend that everybody does that. It is a really great way of working through all of the different steps to build more recognition and then ask for a reward. Once you have your career goals in place, you want to think about your behaviours and how you show up every day. So the template is split into 4 sections. How you are, what character traits do you have now, and which ones would serve you better and help you achieve your goals? How you work with others, how do you treat those around you? Can you work more positively? Do you actively listen to those you work with? How can you enhance your relationships and get recognised for the person you are and the values that you bring? What do you do is the 3rd section. The actions you take speak volumes. Doing nothing says a huge amount. Again, think about the work that you do, the actions you take. What can you do more or less of that will move you towards your goals? And lastly, how do you behave? How you behave is the outward expression of who you are. Does your outward expression match how you feel and what you think internally? You may think something different, but for reasons you might not be able to put that out into the world. Can you change your behaviours so that you get the results that you want? Now, as I said, this is a fantastic template to take away and work on as you are starting to build the recognition that you want. Now, as a little aside, I wanted to talk about job hopping. That's when you move quickly between jobs. You're only there for maybe a year or 2 before you move on to your next role. And the reason I want to point it out is because my career development and reward, not necessarily recognition, but certainly reward, has and always did come from job hopping. Now, the longest job that I had was 3 years. And I was promoted in that role, and I would have stayed longer, but unfortunately I was made redundant. Other than that role, most of my jobs have lasted around 2 years, maybe 3. Because after 2 years, I felt personally that I was no longer being challenged and had no further to go either with the executive that I was working for or that company. And that was mostly the case because after a couple of years, I wanted to be promoted, I wanted more challenges, I wasn't being motivated, but the companies that I worked within, as I said before, were accountancy firms, law firms, insurance firms that had so much structure in place that I was always hitting the assistant ceiling, so to speak, in that I was the highest paid in my grade. I couldn't get any more promotions unless I changed my role, which I didn't want to. I loved being an executive assistant. So there was nowhere more for me to go in a lot of those cases. I wasn't going to be getting any huge pay rises anytime soon. So for me, I job hop. And at the time, that was quite frowned upon. But I always made sure that I had a great answer during my interviews if the job hopping question ever came up. So that was never an issue in terms of interviews. I was always able to work my way around that. But it was frowned upon at the time because people expected loyalty of their staff in companies. It didn't often work the other way around though. So personally for me, I think that it's without doubt the easiest way I found to progress my career and to get a better salary. And actually, according to a recent survey from Account Temp, it is actually becoming much less frowned upon than it used to be. And it's losing its stigma with 57% of 18 to 34-year-olds saying that changing jobs every few years can actually enhance your career and not detract from it. Now, as I said, the reason I'm offering this piece of advice is because it worked for me. With every job I got a big pay rise. It was much easier to demand a higher salary in a new organisation than it was in the organisation that I was working in. And the other reason I would say it is because it absolutely sucks. It's so draining working with an executive or working for an organisation that doesn't invest in you and doesn't take your career seriously. If you are in that situation and you have gone through all of the channels of trying to get more recognition, asking for a salary review, and you're just not getting it, you've got to ask yourself if there's something that you can do. And if there isn't, then looking for a new job is completely a viable option. You're not letting anybody down. You're not doing yourself a disservice to move into a new role. Now, I know that's easier said than done. I know that not all environments where you guys are based is conducive to that. I know it can be hard to find a new job. And I know that job markets aren't the same everywhere across the world. So I am talking you through all of the steps that you can move forward to get more recognition and reward. But in the back of your mind, you've always got to think there is the option to move roles. As I've spoken a lot across this session, I want to talk about your self-belief. I want to talk about what you say to yourself when you talk to yourself. Now, I've always believed that your job title shouldn't define who you are. So even if you are regarded in your organisation as just the assistant, it doesn't mean that you have to act that way or you have to feel that way. We talk a lot about being a strategic business partner, and I think every assistant should think of themselves as a strategic business partner, because that means that you are an asset to your business, someone who adds value, and the scope of opportunities will open up to you when you start to have that self-belief. It's really important to talk to yourself and say the things that are positive. Believe that you deserve the reward and recognition. And I mean literally tell yourself this, because you will notice that your confidence rises and your voice starts to get louder when internally you believe that you deserve it, because you do. Team that with the changes in the actions that you have and how you show up every day at work. That determination will start to come through. The first thing you need to do when you tell yourself that you want a salary increase, or you just want to be recognised for the work that you do, the first thing that you have to start telling yourself and asking yourself is, am I showing up every day? Am I doing everything that I possibly can to be excellent in this role and to really deserve the reward and recognition that I want? Because quite often, I'll be frank, there have been times when I thought to myself, I really want a salary increase. It's that time of year where everybody is getting their pay rises and I'm not getting a great pay rise. Why is that? And I can honestly say now, looking back, at the time I thought it's because I'm an assistant and it's not fair. But actually, it was because I wasn't showing up every day at work, really driving my role forward, really excelling in it, which my colleagues around me were doing. So it was as much my fault that I wasn't getting a salary increase as it was that the role itself wasn't getting recognised. So the first thing you have to do on this reward and recognition journey is show up every day, be positive, be proactive, put yourself forward in these projects and visible things where you can really show what you can do. And as I said, that determination will show through. And then the second thing is you have to speak to yourself in a confident way. You have to say to yourself, you deserve pay rises, promotions, respect, responsibility, reward, and recognition as much as anybody else in your organisation does. And as I said, once you start telling yourself that you deserve it, internally, that will shine and show up in the way that you do things and the way that people treat you. To tie everything together, I want to ask the most important question that you are going to be asked today across this whole course, and it's worth thinking about. Do you see your current role as a career or is it a job? Now, either answer is completely fine. You just need to know, because this impacts everything that you do. And as I said, in my early career, I definitely had a job that paid the bills and my passions were outside of the office. And that's fine. Once I realised that I wanted to move my outlook, it completely changed, as I said, how I showed up every day. I showed up in a different way. I showed up much more professionally. I showed up much more positively. I showed up much more confidently. And that really made a huge difference because I started to realise that I had and wanted a career. I didn't want a job. If you want to have a career, particularly in this industry, and you want to be seen as a professional person who, as I said, should absolutely be rewarded, invested in, then you need to show up and show that you are in this as a career and it's not just a job. Okay, so that concludes my session today. As I said, we are going to be talking a lot across this session about career and development, and I hope you find this session useful and all of the other sessions that we have for you.